to the Built on Air podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. Each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir.com. Any business running on Airtable gets the value that Airtable has, but also needs a few more functions to complete their operations. That's where OnToAir comes in. It's a suite of tools for any business running on Airtable to maximize your operations efficiencies and automations. One customer, John, states that OnToAir enables his business to function properly without having to think about building their own software, and that is pretty invaluable. The OnToAir Airtable apps are amazing, and we use them often and are very happy with the results. So join John and hundreds more customers and take your Airtable to the next level with OnToAir. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air. All right, welcome to the Built on Air podcast. This is season 9, episode 12, the final episode of the season, which also means the final episode of 2021. It's been a good year. We've had, we're now at 108 episodes of this podcast. So we passed 100 episodes this season, and it's been a blast to be with you. We've done the live show for a couple seasons now, and it's good to be with you. I'm Dan Fellers, one of the founders of Built on Air, and with regular host Alli. Good to see you again, Alli. We'll also have regular Camille joining us here shortly. And we also have a new special guest, Rebecca. Hey, Rebecca, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you guys?
Doing great. Glad you could be with us. And we'll get to hear your story a little bit later in the episode, but we're glad you could be with us, participate in our segments. And so as always, our podcast is a 4-segment podcast where we go through different segments of things that we're doing that are happening in the Airtable world. We always kick off with Around the Bases, where we'll go through all the different communities and see what people are talking about. Then we will do a spotlight on our primary sponsor, OnToAir. And then we will do an audience question with Alli and figure out what's going on with questions in the communities. Then we'll get to meet and dive deep into Rebecca, hear your story, find out a little bit more about you. And then a quick pause for a break to first, actually, I think we will do a quick spotlight on Built on Air, and then we'll end with Rebecca showing us something pretty amazing. I think you'll I'm looking forward to seeing what you built using Siri to update Airtable. So excited to see that. So let's kick off with our Round the Bases, see what people are talking about in different communities. And this might be a first. I didn't find anything in the actual Airtable community. Definitely lots of discussions, obviously continued discussions on interfaces and lots of questions there. We highlighted that last week, so I didn't have any new ones to highlight this week. So we're going to jump to, but there is one that's kind of related to the Airtable community, but I first saw it posted in the Built on Air community, and Hannah was the first to bring this out. I think she saw it from the email. If you got emails from Airtable, I subscribe to like multiple bases because of the client work that I do. So every time Airtable sends out emails, I get like 10 to 15 of these announcements. So I see them quite a bit, but this was really cool. Basically, they were like highlighting something to come. So I don't think this is live yet. I do think it's in beta. Have either of you gotten the beta to see the conditional logic and automations?
I'm like on the W list when it comes to these A/B things. I'm always the last person to see anything.
Yeah, yeah. I told Jordan, I think Jordan was mentioning like, hey, if you want to be added to the list, let me know. So I told her, I think I'm on the list, but I have not gotten access to it yet. Have you, Alli?
I haven't yet, no. And there used to be a form that they had to sign
Yeah.
up for betas, but I can't find it anymore. They've disabled it or changed what they do. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I'd love some more
Yeah.
visibility on it, like
I
Yep.
think it was like kept very, very limited because the only thing that I saw was something that Jordan posted in the community, and the like way to sign up, which she had directed the question at or the answer at one specific person. So I didn't like take it upon myself to also use that route, but she was just having him message her in the Airtable community. So I think it was a very, very closed beta. It's probably mainly their enterprise people testing it out, if I had to imagine.
Yeah, possibly. But anyways, they did provide a screenshot of it in the email notifications. So this might be kind of hard to see, but so it looks like they just kind of have like these groupings, and then inside of each group, it has the sub tasks that you can run. And so they must have some, way to determine which path to go down. And then somebody mentioned, I think it was Ben in the community, just kind of pointing out they thought it was funny how they moved to giving you more room to work with, but they're still just going straight down with the displays. So kind of funny that they didn't take advantage of that extra space that they created.
Well, and I definitely think that there's a few things that need to be addressed before you get into something like a branching UI. Being able to name things, rename your action steps. If I have 10 Slack messages going out, kind of like this one does here, I don't really know right off the bat which one is which. A lot of my automations, I have to build like a chunk for each plant. So they're just incremented by one. And so I need to be able to see which chunk is for which plant. And you really can't do that in a way that could be conducive of a UI where you have all of these boxes everywhere.
Yeah. It looks like over here on the right, it looks like you can label the grouping. So there's a custom button right here. So it has the default that's based off of the condition. And then it looks like there's a custom button, so you could rename the grouping and then give it a description, so you can at least.
And so maybe they're already doing it.
Yeah, but yeah, it looks like, I don't know if the actual tasks can get renamed yet.
Yeah, that would be great.
Useful.
Just like you can in Zapier, that would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe they'll introduce this kind of custom button on the tasks as well.
That'd be great.
I wish that you took this center UI with all of the steps, made each of those individual boxes expandable to have what's over here on the right, but have all of this over here on this right side. So you're just making it longer. Like if you're going to keep it in one line, keep it on the right where we're used to having it.
Welcome. Just real quick, welcome, Camille. We're just talking about the sneak peek on the conditional automations.
Yep. Hi, guys.
Hello. I was just about to say, the more and more I'm working with this new layout, the more I dislike it. Like and it's not even just like that you can't see the table data. It's like accessing the run history is really difficult. You can't turn something on or off without making it full screen. Like sometimes it's like the run history just disappears if you start editing it. And it's like, no, I want to go back to that screen, and you have to close out and go back in. And it's a mess. I mean, usually I don't say that with their new releases, but I'm like, no, I like the old one better.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Although another thing I just noticed, it looks like they're adding tabs over here. So there's a property tab and a testing tab.
That's
So
interesting.
that's new as well. Maybe they could have a history tab right there. That would be helpful.
Exactly. Like just like they used to. It was just right in the corner, said
Yeah.
run history.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah, I'm surprised they don't already have that there. Yeah, because you have to go to back and then go into the history and find it in all of your automation. So
Well, so I think if you just click into the gray space outside of anything and you don't have anything selected, it will show you your runs over there on the side.
Okay.
But to explain that to anybody else.
Right.
Yeah, it's not super obvious. So yeah, I could see it. It would make sense to have like a run history tab that's just sort of always in the corner.
Yeah.
And when they gave the expanded screen real estate, I was under the impression that, like, I think we all reasonably guessed that we were going to have some form of conditional logic in automations, because it's, a fairly typical thing to add in. But we were, I think, at least I was picturing branching logic, like a vertical integromat, if you will. So I kind of echo Rebecca's earlier point that, keeping it vertical doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know if this is the final layout they go with, but improvements to be made.
yeah. The cool thing is like in Zapier, I know Zapier limits it to how many branches you can have. I wonder if there isn't a limit on branches, and that's one of the benefits of going vertical is it makes it easier to have as many as you need. And each one looks like can have its own condition. So it's not an either or. It could run down every branch if they match the conditions of that branch.
But are we still limited to 25 actions?
Well, yeah, good question. I don't know.
I think we should assume that we still have that 25 limit. In some cases, it's not a problem because a lot of people had to have a bunch of steps to sort of get around the fact that there was no conditional logic. But now that they've introduced conditional logic, you might want even more steps than you ordinarily would have to keep everything within one automation as opposed to several automations. So it's a, catch 22 of the number that we currently have. It's 25. Is that right?
Yeah.
25 automations. And what was there a limit on number of tasks
Yes.
within an automation?
I
Also 25?
vaguely recall it being the same number, so
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's 25. It'd be nice if we had an up to limit. Automations limits are, I think, the most rigid limit that is imposed on Airtable users. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of good ways to get around them without scripting or syncing your bases to another base and using that base's automations and yada yada.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
And that relates to something we'll talk about more about the sync intervals too later on.
Yeah.
Well, we also, as like the Airtable community, as soon as they put something out and say like, "Hey guys, look what we built for you," we're like, "Brah!" and we just rip them apart. So like maybe let it be out there.
This is why I try to be a little bit measured, because nothing's ever perfect, and you have 10 billion use cases that they have to make the product useful for. However, every now and again, there's a few decisions where even I'm like, what'd you do and why?
Surely you have to get some test data in on some of these things. You have to get some feedback at a certain point.
Yeah, because if we don't talk about it, then they're not gonna fix it. So
right, for sure. So, anyways, exciting guesses on when this is gonna come out?
Probably before the new year, I would think. At least
You think before the end of the year? I don't know about that.
It seems pretty built.
It's being built. Oh, okay. I was just thinking if it was in a beta now. They've been pretty fast about going from beta to.
That's true.
Release.
Sometimes skipping, beta completely.
Yeah, true.
Interfaces. It wasn't sent out to like enterprise clients beforehand, so
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So Justin's saying no sooner than January. So we'll see. All right, let's move on. Next one. Let's go on to the Facebook community. Let's see what's going on there. Let me close my family chat. So this was interesting. There was a couple in the Airtable community and Facebook. There is actually two of them that I'll show here that were both related to phone numbers. So I thought we'd have a phone number themed update on how to deal with phone numbers. And Camille, I think you were the solvee on this one. And so basically trying to format phone numbers. This person, Brian, actually knows, shout out to Brian, is in South Africa. And so trying to deal with the specific phone numbers in South Africa. So Camille, you remember how you answered this one?
Well, it was the beginning of an answer, and I think they actually ended up using regex or regex to sort of foolproof it. I did, at first I was just like, concatenate the plus 27 at the front and then take the rightmost 9 characters from the original phone number, but the phone numbers were coming in with the dashes and parentheses, so that 9 wouldn't work. So instead, I was like, well, you could use some substitutes to remove the dash and the parentheses, or you could just use a regex function. I didn't immediately jump to regex because I don't understand it. So,
yeah, first you start with a simple right, then substitute would be the kind of the next phase up, right? Or go all the way to regex replace.
Well, and so one that I use all the time is just the value.
Yeah, that's the next one, Rebecca. I think, you were the answer to the next one that was similar. We could go there.
Solve that problem too.
Yeah. So walk through so here's a similar one. They want it in this form, or it comes in this format, but they want it just straight up numbers. So walk through how that worked for you, Rebecca.
Sure. So it's not foolproof. Like it doesn't work 100% of the time on every formatted number. I think it might be better if I used absolute value instead of just value, so I didn't have to deal with the dashes creating negatives sometimes. I don't use Airtable for math, so I just know that said make this a number. So sometimes in like addresses and stuff, it'll throw a negative or a weird long number or something off the wall, but just to get, like a phone number and such, I've had great luck with it.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't realize that value would extract. I thought that it would give an error if it wasn't already, formatted like a number. I've only used value when I needed to do math and I knew it was like a string, but I wanted to like multiply it by something.
Do you know what I actually use it for? I use it for addresses to make sure that the number of the address is the same, because sometimes we might pour a whole subdivision. To give a little bit of backstory, I work for a concrete company. So we might pour a whole subdivision and they don't even have numbers when we start. They're getting numbers as they're being built. But they're all on the same street. So as I'm deduping or even running like a script or something, it can get caught up and confused. And so a lot of times we dedupe manually because we need to see if they just transposed a number or that's really an address or whatever. So I just use value to strip out everything else. And then I match by the name and that value. The only thing is if it's empty, it returns 0. I haven't been able to do any sort of substitutions or anything to get that to go away. It errors out. So
could just do an if check.
That have 0.
Right.
Yeah, it's
very
super
cool.
Yeah, it'll take out any number from a string, like even if it has letters, just like Rebecca just said, which is super helpful. The only way I would say that's not working is if you have like, don't some like European numbers start with zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the only. Like,
and even US zip codes start with 0 some.
Yeah, so that's a good point. It'll turn it into a math number, and so 027 is the same as 27, so it's going to tell you 27.
Yeah, so you don't get the trailing zeros or the intro
I wonder
ones.
though if you could just say if the value in the original field, the left one of the original field is 0, add a 0.
You can do that.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. And you could, if you don't have anything but numbers and, well, no, just kidding. I was just going to say you could maybe compare the original length to whatever, but then that's just a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's ways where you could do some padding. I don't think they have they have a repeat. You can maybe use the repeat somehow.
Yep.
That would get complicated. You need a Van Hall for that. Yeah, so that's so going on that theme of dealing with ways to deal with phone numbers. That's always tricky. Addresses. So a couple of tips on how you could interact with your numbers better from those two suggestions. So moving on, let's go to Twitter, and this was a cool thread by Karthik, and he runs a company. And he talks about how they're basically running a $3 million company, and they're only paying $60 a month for their software stack, which includes Airtable, amongst other ones. And so he actually has a article. So if you want to learn how real life businesses making millions of dollars are building their product on top of these platforms like Airtable, here's a good article where he talks about different platforms that he uses and how he uses the ones he does. So he also answers a lot of questions from people on how he does it. So real life scenario of a real company using Airtable as their main product. So cool stuff there. All right, there's now a new community, and we'll start including this in our Round the Bases. Our friend Gareth, that we know well, is one of the administrators of this group. So if you're on LinkedIn, if you prefer LinkedIn as your social media source, check out the Airtable product community, and it's growing rapidly. I think they're up to 682 members already. It just started 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yep, 2 weeks. And so there's activity going on in there. One thing that I wanted to highlight in here was from somebody, I'd never seen this before, but Ryan talks about the SSO Wall of Fame. So SSO stands for Single Sign-On. And he links to this website, sso.tax. And it's a list that people keep of companies that use SSO as like an enterprise only feature. And they kind of, that's looked down upon, especially in the security world, because you're basically saying, we'll allow insecure manners if you're not paying us a lot of money. And they're trying to get people to provide security to all their users, not just the enterprise ones. For security's sake. And so they keep a list of, unfortunately, Airtable starting with A is at the top of the list, but of all the software companies that use SSO as a tax to pay their enterprise fees. So I thought that was interesting on there. So that's something that, I don't know if they'll ever change that or not. I'm guilty of this. It's actually making me rethink. We don't have single sign-on, but we do have two-factor authentication that's only available on our higher plans. And so it's making me think for onto air, I need to make that available to all users as a security means so that I don't show up on this list. I'm obviously a small player that won't make this list, but I might consider doing that to stay off of their list in the
Yeah,
future.
I've talked before that the system my company uses to sort of as my CRM is Outseta, and they allow you to do single sign-on for your customers for free, I believe, or as just part of your plan. And I haven't enabled it, and I could. So now I feel like that's the next thing I'm going to do, I guess.
We got to get off the wall of shame.
I know.
Very good. So that's kind of all the topics. So we will now add the LinkedIn group to see if there's anything worthwhile to share with you. And if there's any other communities out there that we're not touching on, feel free to let us know in the comments and we'll get them added to our Around the Bases. Hannah is now shaming us. Thanks, Hannah. All right, moving on. Let's do a quick spotlight on OnToAir. OnToAir is an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable. It's a suite of apps that do a variety of different things, from backing up your data to making it easier to interact with your data inside of Airtable. And for today's segment, I wanted to highlight our schema app and kind of give or announce a sneak peek. We do have some updates coming to the schema app in the next month. So I'll announce those. We're actually working on getting it into the marketplace so that it'll actually be an app in the marketplace. And the big differentiator, this will obviously look similar if you're using the default one that comes from Airtable. It's a similar look and feel. We actually reuse the same open source UI that they were using. So I'll give them credit for that tidbit. But the things that we added to this to make it more admin specific is, one, the ability to scroll in and out. So if you have a large one, we have zooming functionality. We also keep a history of all the changes. So you take snapshots whenever you're making changes to your structure of your database, and then you can see the changes, and you can also look to see what actually happened. So when you're adding new fields or views, they'll show up and you can see snapshot by snapshot. You can actually go back in history and see the diagrams of the different versions of your data. So if you have a large base and you're the admin for your Airtable base, you definitely want to check out Schema to help you manage it. In the next release that's coming in a month, we'll have the ability to where you can make comments on your fields and see them all in one view and be able to interact more. We'll also be adding the ability to export your schema, so you can download your schema as a JSON or CSV file. So some nice enhancements coming to our schema product. So check that out, ontoair.com, and check out our schema along with all of our other apps. With that, we're now going to do an audience question. Alli, if you want to share your screen.
Yes, absolutely.
And this one's kind of fun because Alli's going to answer her own question.
Well, with the help of Scott, of course. Scott always coming to the rescue. So this is something that it was actually from about a month ago, but I thought it was really interesting. And Airtable actually ended up updating their support docs because Scott reached out to them for me, which I said I was going to do, and then I didn't, and then he did. So thank you, Scott. So basically, just like Camille had mentioned at the beginning of, or towards the beginning of this episode, something you can do to work around the automation limit is to sync a particular table or tables or views, etc., to a separate base and then run your automations out of that base. And that's exactly what I was trying to do here. But I set up, I have this report that runs nightly in a big giant base, and I'm trying really hard to clean up this giant base and just make it way easier to use. And one of those high overhead processes that was kind of bogging the system down was this report, because I had a bunch of helper fields for it. And I just wanted to remove those crazy rollups from that base and move them out into their own little house, so to speak. And when I went to go do that, I set everything up and I just let the automation run for a few nights so that I could compare the current report to what would become the new one in the sync version. And I found after a couple nights that there was always one or two more records in the report, the existing report, like coming from my master source base, than there were in the synced version. And so in order to like kind of do some starting of testing, I put in a created time field into the synced version. And I was noticing that new records were added at exactly 8 p.m., which is exactly the time that my report was running in both bases. And so I kind of just laid that out here because all of Airtable's documentation just said, yeah, it'll sync every 5 minutes. But that is not the case, or it was not the case in this situation. And so with some help from Scott, we did a couple little sleuthing things, and we had a discussion about maybe it had to do with the now and today functions and everything. But ultimately, what I did was I set up an automation to run 5 minutes before my report, and that fixed it. So essentially what the takeaway is synced bases do not actually sync every 5 minutes unless they're being accessed by a user or an API call. Similar to, but a little bit different. And so, yeah, essentially, if that's something that you are planning to do, like to save on automations, you might have to actually set up a second automation that runs before anything. So that way you have all the most up-to-date data. And if we scroll down here, Adam from Airtable updated the support articles to show what the limitations are. I haven't actually looked at them yet, but so yeah, that's it. I thought it was kind of interesting and definitely helpful if that's something you're planning to do. You should definitely know that if you're trying to do a nightly thing, it's not going to update automatically with all of your data unless you have something touch it first.
Yeah, that's really big. I don't think people realize that if they're relying on that sync data to just be there and be updated all the time. Mm-hmm. Very, very good to understand the dynamics of that. I'm sure that's caused because you probably don't notice it in the automation, and then you go and look at the data, and at that point it's updated and you're like, what happened? The data's there, why didn't it go through the automation?
Yeah, this exact problem is why I only do that in bases that I use manual triggers, and I right click sync now before triggering the automation.
It'd be nice if the sync component was exposed to scripting so that you could force, as a run a script action, if you could just force a synced table or series of synced tables to update. Because it's, as far as I know, just API calls that it's making behind the scenes. If you could force that and then add that as like the first step to your automation, that'd be cool. Right.
Do you know if it has to be a write update or could a read trigger it?
Literally, all mine does is just find records. Like I don't even do anything with it. It runs. It like finds a record. I have finds one record on a summary table, and that's it. And so it forces everything to resync, and then my actual report can run with the most up-to-date data. Interesting.
But it doesn't happen before that call to find records, right? It happens after.
Exactly.
So your process that does the find records still has the old data, but it then triggers the sync to happen.
Right. It's essentially just a dummy automation that doesn't do anything. It just forces it to update so that I can do something with the next automation.
And do you do that against the which base do you do that against? The source base or the destination base?
The destination.
Okay.
So in the synced version, I have just that random one that runs 5 minutes before my other one. They both run at a scheduled time. So one runs at 7:55 and then the report runs at 8. So it
It's a
gives me
little
enough time.
alarm clock.
What was that?
It's just a little alarm clock.
Exactly.
Like,
It's like, wake up. Time to do things.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I wonder if a call to the third party to the REST API would also trigger that. I think it would.
I would think so. I noticed like another little helper that helped me reach this conclusion, aside from Scott, was I logged in for the first time in the morning one day and I watched everything update. And so I was like, oh, wow, like nothing had gone overnight. And so I was like, oh, I guess someone has to be looking at it, someone or something, in order for it to sync.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Good stuff. So, yeah. So if you're having weird, bizarre behavior and you're using sync data, then this might be the culprit that you want to check out. Very cool. Thanks, Alli, for that. Let me bring this back. All right, next segment, we're going to find out about Rebecca. Tell me how you say your last name.
Elam.
Elam, okay. Rebecca Elam. So Rebecca, tell us a little bit about your history. We'd love to hear where you're located, who you work for, how you found Airtable, what's your experience been like working with Airtable?
Sure. So my name is Rebecca Elam. I am from San Marcos, Texas. It's right outside of Austin. Born and raised here. I work for a company based out of New Braunfels called Ingram Ready Mix. We have 40 plants across South Texas. If you're from around here, you'll recognize the big black and yellow trucks. And basically, what I do for them is provide resources, I would say. So the resources that nobody's giving anybody resources for. So things like a company directory, things like audits for billing, being able to generate documents to mail out, emails for, we do have sort of a mail merge system for our invoicing, but we can't really do anything else with it because we can't control what goes on in the document. So just having Airtable, really what we're trying to do is replace people. We can't get anybody into the office to work. You can't fill positions. So it has to come from somewhere. How I found Airtable is actually a totally different story. So I have been along the Airtable ride since 2016, and I actually came across it for Pokemon organization. So
Rock on.
the Pokemon fans, well, maybe Pokemon fans, it depends on how you feel about the game, but we'll remember 2016 is the year of Pokemon Go. And at that time, they hadn't figured out that people could spoof their location and play from their couches. They have since figured it out, so I'm not as into the game anymore. But I had quite the collection. But if you really get into it, there's actually a lot of strategy that goes into it and who you use against who and all of that stuff. And then there's different versions of those things, and those different versions of the same thing, do other things. And I unfortunately don't have that account anymore to be able to show off my awesome Pokemon databases. But if there was a way to get that back, I would be very interested. So Airtable, hit me up. I can give you the address. But yeah, I went away for a while.
So you built the bases, or somebody introduced you to Airtable that had built them originally?
No, I actually started in Google Sheets, and then Airtable was like, "Hey, man, come over here."
Tale as old as time.
Yeah.
And so that was like before automations, before synced tables. even like apps were still blocks, and I think like we had like a few, the original ones.
Yeah.
So I went away for a while. I didn't really have a use for it, and then I came into about 5,000 baseball cards from a Goodwill in Aurora, Colorado, and I needed some way to go through them. And I was like, well, Excel's not going to do this. And so that was in, I would say, 2018. So I took a little bit of a break there, and then I started this job. And yeah, it all starts with Pokemon Go. It does. But when I got here, we were very much Big Chief tablet, number 2 pencil, like everything gets printed out and put in a box and like put in a storage shed on the back of the property. Like it's not very modernized. A lot of the same people have been working there for decades. So things are still being done the same way they were done decades ago. And a lot of it is just that people don't know that there's a better way. And so things like having to create emails for managers, and they're sitting there filtering down an Excel spreadsheet, copy pasting it over into an Outlook email and sending them one by one. And I'm just like, it pains me. I'm like, no, just let me do it. Just tell me what needs to go in the email. Just send it to me, the one you already made. I got you. And I'm still learning. Even I've been doing this now since May of 2020. And so for all the people asking, can you learn it on your own? 100%. You're looking at the people that are going to teach you. Same thing along with, shameless plug for Off the Record. On Wednesday, we now have a Tuesday. Well, I guess you guys are going on vacation for a little bit. We've got a Tuesday show, a Wednesday show, and Table Talk on Thursday. And if there's anybody else I don't know about, feel free to throw them in there too. But there's plenty of people to help you out. And people like Ben and Gareth have just put together, they've given you the answers. You just have to go get them.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's cool to see Airtable going into kind of old school businesses, and Alli also is in that world as well, seeing it evolve. And it's really kind of been a game changer for these smaller businesses that haven't really adopted technology yet.
Yep. Some of my favorite episodes from like the original format of Built on Air was interviewing people who just sort of worked somewhere and looked around at their system and went, we could do better than this.
Well, I literally couldn't do my job the way that it was handed to me to do. My brain doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. Like I have diagnosed ADHD and autism. So like my brain works in relationships, not in a stack of paper this big handed to me, told to keep it in order. And I've talked a lot before about people just calling me saying, I need this information right now for this vehicle. I can't do that from a binder. I can't. Yeah. So it really, not only on the accessibility side, because even with just on the kind of neurodivergent side of things, there's whole communities of people who use Airtable just to live their life and take their meds every day and, make sure that they go to their appointments and all of those sorts of things, or even just brush their teeth every day. Like you would be surprised at some of the struggles that people go through, that just having a little email that goes off in the morning to remind you to do something, and only a 5-minute setup to make that happen. It's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah. Very cool. Great. Well, glad you could be with us. And if you want to start sharing your screen, I'm going to do a quick plug while you're getting ready. share my screen first. For the Built on Air community, so this podcast is part of the community. We also have our website at BuiltOnAir.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you can also join our Slack community. So we are approaching 900 members in our Slack community. The goal was to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. So we need 100 more people to join for us to reach our goal. So tell your friends, tell everybody to join our community, get to meet amazing people like the four of us are in that community and many others, help each other out, talk about what's going on. You can be a little bit more loose with your feedback regarding Airtable, and we're all fans. So we're all trying to just make the product better and help each other out. So check out BuiltOnAir.com/join to join our Built on Air community. And once you get your screen, Rebecca, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Give it to you. So this segment will be an automate create, and Rebecca's going to walk through some cool stuff that she's put together. There you go. Go for it.
Okay, can you see everything first of all? Because my monitors are really big. Okay.
Yep.
So first of all, if you don't already have Siri shortcuts installed on your phone, you do have to go into the App Store and install it. I think it's already on your Mac if you've updated to the Mac OS 12. I think that's the number that we're on. Anyway, basically what I have done is made it to where the guys in the field at the plants can just say, and I'll try to do it quietly because they're all going to go off at one time, but they can just say, hey, I need to order a registration, or hey, I need to order replacement plates. That's a lot of the stuff I do, is keep up with the paperwork for the trucks that are on the road. And obviously it's a very expensive mistake if that paperwork is not kept up by both me and the driver and the managers. There's most frustrating part of my job is that for me to get my job done from point A to point B, there's like 5 people in between. Mm-hmm. And so this just makes it to where those people can communicate back with me. And go through one of these. Oops. I will preface this by saying this is like my one cool Airtable trick. So I
That's
don't
not
actually
true.
know what I'm doing. I don't really know anything about APIs. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I built these and they work. So I actually built these thanks to Aaron and his Siri episode
Of Table Talk?
No.
No. Of his automate all things.
Yes, automate all the things. It was actually from a while back, and I was really surprised I hadn't seen it already. But I watched it a few times. Sometimes it takes me a few times. I will say about Aaron, if you don't get his videos yet, just learn some more first from some other people, and then come back. And then you'll get them, and they'll help you, and he will be like your saving grace. But in the beginning, sometimes I had to get a few opinions.
Yeah.
So this looks super scary, but this particular one does a lot of things. So what this does, and I'll run it in just a second so that you guys can see it. Basically what it's doing is
Yeah.
I have a few tricks, but this is like the coolest trick.
Okay.
So Siri, I'm saying, hey, I need a registration. Siri says, for what truck? I say the truck. And then he says, did you say X truck? So that if it transposes your numbers or whatever, you can change it. There's an if statement, or rather, it's not technically an if statement. You can put if statements in here, but I promise I will go back over this and re-explain because I'm doing a really bad job. But
You're doing fine.
If you choose yes, it goes through, it gets the URL for that particular place in the API, and then it asks for the information from that URL. This all looks super scary, but I promise it's not. And then if you say no, and then it just creates the call and sends the record back to Airtable, and this is what you get. So once it gets here, an automation links it back to the truck that it goes to, and a whole different system puts it in line to be ordered with my next set of registrations. So if you say no, it says, sorry about that, for what truck? And it starts the whole thing over again, basically. What this allows us to do is make it to where not all of my managers have to have Airtable licenses to do one thing. Once you build this, you just share it. The one kind of caveat is that they do have to have a specific setting enabled in their phones to allow shortcuts from other places, but it hasn't really seemed to be an issue so far. They've been able to get there. So basically, I'm going to build a little bit different shortcut that's a little easier for time's sake. But that's what we use Siri for so far. And I hope to add out a lot more Siri functionality. But right now we'll just do a brain dump. So basically the idea behind this is that you will be able to say, hey Siri, I need to brain dump. And then she will just listen to what you say, and it can be dictated into here. So this could be great as a scratch pad. Sometimes you just need to talk to somebody. So it's a great way to store some of that stuff. So you can also build these straight from your phone, which was the major kind of selling point for me, is that I can work from wherever. Never stop working. So first, if you don't know how to get to your API documentation, oops. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah. Be careful about your API key.
Oh, that's a good point. So you can access the API here by clicking API. Let me just, I think it's hidden by default, but
It is. So we can't see that window now on your screen if you want to.
yeah, I moved it. Hold on just a second.
You can also, it's right there, the link in that additional resources.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is hidden. Okay. So this is your API documentation. Again, it looks super scary, but once you actually start reading it, it makes a little bit more sense. So this particular base only has one table in it with a few fields. So it's going to be very simple. I might actually have to put some stuff in here to get it to give me information, but this.
Hannah says, love how you set it up for your truckers so they could easily send email to you.
Oh yeah.
Or info to you.
It's super helpful, and the thing is the easier that I can make it on them, the easier they make it on me. So it turns into a mutually beneficial situation. So first of all, whenever you're using an API call, you're generally building onto a URL, from what I understand. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about, so please feel free to expand on anything that I'm saying. But in this particular case, we need this URL right here. And so it's going to seem like I'm kind of working backwards, but this is the way that it best helps me kind of, because basically I'm putting the key in the door first, even though you don't actually need that key until later on. It'll make sense. So first of all, we just need to store the URL. Simple. Next, we have to get the stuff out of that URL. Right now, there's only one variable or one step, so it's automatically assuming it because it's the one above it. Sometimes when you get to using a bunch of these, you want to put those into a variable, which you just do by using set variable. It's I don't know scripting, but from what I understand, it's a lot the same as scripting. So in here, this is where we actually want to tell it what we want to do. I don't know how to do anything except post. So
Yeah,
Go ahead.
probably want to do is this for a read? No, this is for an update.
She's writing to the table, so and creating a new record, so that would be post.
Okay.
Each of those different methods, one would be for updating, one would be just to get information, or reading information. Post is what we're doing, creating a new thing. Put and patch, forget the difference between them, and delete says what it does.
So from what I understand, put is destructive and patch like adds, right?
So put basically means it will overwrite every field. So if you're not adding a field, then it's going to clear out those fields. Yeah. So I almost always do a patch. So if you're debating which one, go with the patch, because a patch will only update the fields that you send to it.
Excellent. And those are universal terms for, dealing with API kind of requests. So it's not just a Siri shortcuts thing.
Yep.
So then we're basically creating kind of a dictionary almost. First, we have to do our authorization. I'm going to have to cheat and look at one of the others to remember how to do this. I probably should have prepared a little bit more.
Will your authorization showcase your API key?
I will probably hide that part, but there are some steps that. Yeah, it does. Let me move that one over here.
So yeah, you basically add a header with the name authorization, and it's a bearer token, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just type the word authorization.
Yeah, with the capital A. Yeah.
And then you can see here, it says bearer. And then if I turn on show API key, it will say your API key. You can just copy and paste that into the value next to it.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard. I don't know what bearer means. I don't know why that became standard, but that's pretty standard API usage.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, we have a unique URL for every base. Every base has its own ID, and providing an authorization is basically proving to Airtable we should have access to the base because we're a creator of this base or we're a collaborator, which is why it really depends on which API key you use, because that's how it determines whether or not you have the right to edit or make any sort of updates to a particular base.
And currently, your API is tied to a user. So any updates you do with that API key will look as if that user performed it.
So updates in Airtable, usually seem like they come from you, if that makes sense. If you yourself type in a field, or if your API key is being used for making edits via an app or via, Siri shortcuts like Rebecca is doing, the exceptions to the rule would be if you're completing an Airtable form or if you are doing something via automations.
Yep.
That's very interesting. I did not know that.
It's considered anonymous.
So next we're going to build the body. Basically what you're building is like a little JSON blurb. And this is just hiding the writing of that JSON object. So we need to tell it what fields we want. And so if you have more than one, it's kind of good practice in my experience to use a dictionary, even if you only have one item. But then within oops. It just went away.
Yeah, that was very
Hold on. Sorry, that was weird. So I totally lost my place. I'm so sorry, guys.
You were adding the fields that you want to edit.
Right.
And right now she's entering her API key off screen. Yeah.
Is it that plus button?
Yeah, I think it is actually. So that's not intuitive. I did these on my phone when I built them the first time. The UI is a little bit different. So now I'm just adding, I got like lost and frazzled. Now I need to add the fields from my base. So right now I actually only need really the idea field. And it's going to be text because we'll have it dictate the text. So now I need to add the step that goes into that little value right there. So I want it to be verbal. Like I want Siri to actually speak it. So I'm going to use the scripting action for ask for input. So it'll say, hey Siri, brain dump. She's going on.
Brain dump to connect to app.
And then I can say like, what do you have to say? And then use that provided input as the value here.
No wonder, does it work like Zapier where it puts like a placeholder in there?
I don't know why when I double click on it, it goes away.
That seems like a bug.
Let's see if it saved your work.
Yeah, it does, fortunately. Oh, right click insert variable. Oh, select variable makes it to where I can just choose the one that I know is correct. Again, naming all of your stuff is a really good idea. So now I should be able to say, hey Siri, brain dump.
Allow brain dump to connect to Airtable.com. Allow
You have to allow it access to your API the first time that
That's
you use
done.
it. Hey Siri, brain dump.
Done.
Oh, no. Of course, the demo never works.
There's no save button. It just sort of live refreshes. I don't think there is. I've never used it.
Did you guys see the video of Aaron doing the live demo with the scanner?
Yes.
This is what I feel like right now. Oh, so, okay. It did. So there's something wrong with my input.
Yeah, that it's not prompting you. It's just immediately sending the thing through the API. So
Hey Siri, brain dump.
That's done.
So this actually happens a lot.
if you run it directly from here, will it work?
Oh, but from my Mac, it prompts me to just type. Or maybe if I do it like this. Brain dump.
Shortcut says, what do you have to say?
It's never said that before. This is the worst demo ever.
I think that was working, right?
Yeah, so it does
Yeah.
work. Let's get something through to the API.
Allow brain dump to connect to Airtable.com.
Appy, Airtable. Did it work? Oh yeah,
I think you have to allow it.
There it is.
I had to allow
Yay.
it from my computer and my Mac.
APA, the American Planning Association.
I will say that Siri does not like my voice, neither does Alexa. I have to like scream at them to get them to do anything. So let's try that one more time and see if it still does the shortcuts thing. Brain dump.
What do you have to say?
Anything.
Okay.
Is my mic really that bad?
I don't- well, this isn't a problem now with what you've built. It's now the fact that Siri doesn't understand your voice, apparently. But what
This
you
works for
demonstrated,
everyone else except for Rebecca.
what you've demonstrated was how simple that was in actuality. And your previous example showed that you could give the option of if it mishears you, you can say it again, and then
Right.
it would, go through. So
Yeah, I guess I'm mostly dealing with numbers, and those are intentionally hard to transpose, but
Very cool. This is cool stuff. I think you could build some awesome applications. There's also another product out there. There's a group doing like taking voice commands from Airtable and then basically using Airtable as like a brain to do voice activated stuff. So there's some cool stuff out there with voice and Airtable. This is a cool showcase of what you can build in Siri and how to interact easily with the API, and no programming required. So awesome stuff. Thank you, Rebecca. That is, let me go back here. And that is the end of the season and the end of the year. So we're so glad you guys could join us. We'll be taking the month of December off, and then we'll be back again in January with more new episodes on our live show. So we hope that you can join us and you have a great rest of the year, and glad you could be with us, and good luck with all your building in Airtable. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, ontoair.com, and we will see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.